Hi, I'm Jay with Family Handyman. I'm going to help you take the mystery out of saw blades. I'm going to run through all the options we have for table saws, stationary crosscut machines, and circular saws. Let's get to it. So let's talk about table saw blades first. If you're going to have just one blade, it should be a combination blade. These do a pretty good job of ripping and a pretty good job of cross-cutting. Tooth geometry on a combination blade is unique. They consist of two sets of alternating bevel teeth and one raker tooth. So to help you visualize, a combination blade has two sets of alternating top bevel teeth followed by one raker tooth. So a combination blade is one that everyone should have in their collection. But let's talk about some specialty blades. So if you're cutting a lot of plywood, it's a good idea to get a dedicated plywood and melamine blade. The difference is the tooth count, but also the tooth geometry. They have what is called a high alternating bevel tooth grind. So unlike a combination blade, which has a less steep top bevel, a plywood and melamine has a very steep top bevel. And what this does is it allows it to cut and slice through the different layers of plywood. So I've changed the blade out on the table saw with a crosscut blade. This is another specialty blade in my collection that I think everybody should have. A crosscut blade for the table saw is different than a blade we're going to use on the miter saw. We'll get to those later. This blade has 60 teeth with alternating top bevels, so that is every other tooth. So for making crosscuts on a table saw, most folks will use a miter gauge. Now, I don't like these. They're not as safe and not very repeatable. I made a crosscut table saw sled, which you can find the plans for online or on our YouTube channel. So this makes crosscuts on a table saw much more accurate, repeatable, and above all, much safer. Let me show you how it works. So this is the type of cut a quality crosscut blade will get you. Super smooth with no chip out. So the next consideration to make when purchasing saw blades is kerf width. Full kerf and thin kerf are basically our choices. Full kerf is a full 1/8 inch and thin kerf is 3/32. Doesn't sound like much, but for an underpowered saw, anything under 3 horsepower, it's going to make a huge difference. So on this display, you can really see the difference between full kerf and thin kerf. So I just changed the saw out to a dedicated ripping blade, my third specialty blade that I think everyone should own. This blade is a full kerf, so besides being a very good ripping blade, because it has a flat top grind, I can use this blade for joinery cuts, making my tenons or smooth bottom slots or dados. The other thing that differentiates a ripping blade from all others is the size of the gullet. I'm going to do a little demonstration to help you visualize how that helps us in making long rip cuts. So when we're ripping along the grain, we're creating a lot of waste, and that's what these large gullets help us get rid of. Now I've slowed the video down just a little bit to try to visualize that for you. But those large gullets serve one more purpose that's very important. Keeps the air moving, which keeps our teeth cool, which eliminates burning when we're cutting. So the reason I use the blades I do is because they have laser cut vibration dampening slots in the blade body. So what does that actually mean? Well, it reduces vibration, which reduces the noise the blade makes, but it might be easier to show you than to tell you. That blade has no vibration, completely dead. In contrast, a blade that does not have these slots cut in it sounds like this. So that's what a vibrating blade sounds like. And that translates to decibel levels when we're using the saw, but it also means those teeth are all doing this, which might translate to poor quality cuts. So for the table saw, I'm happy to use a thin kerf blade. In fact, most of the blades I own are thin kerf. For the sliding miter saw, however, I like to use a full kerf blade. It's a thicker tooth and a thicker body. Thicker body blade means it's stiffer. And on the sliding miter saw, we have the possibility of side-to-side movement. And a thicker, stiffer blade is going to minimize that problem. So besides kerf, an even more important consideration to make when choosing a blade for a sliding crosscut saw, and that includes radial arm saws, is negative hook angle. And that's where the teeth angle backwards. That way they don't dig into the wood, and it makes a much safer cut. So when it comes to circular saws, we can run into all sorts of different materials that we're going to need a blade for. And that's the lovely thing about the selection available to us with circular saw blades. We can cut everything from masonry, just wood and framing, non-ferrous metals, composite decking, even steel and plywood and melamine, and even a 60-tooth ultra-fine finish blade. So a lot of people get frustrated because they think their blade is dull. It's not cutting well and it's burning their wood. I've got news for you. It's not dull, it's just dirty. So let me show you how to bring your blades back to life. So I use this blade and bit cleaner from CMT. So we don't need to use a lot. We just spray the teeth and let it sit for a minute. And with a soft brush, some people even use brass brushes, but I prefer to use a soft plastic brush to avoid damaging my carbide. We do a scrub until we don't see any pitch, and then we just wipe it clean. Once we're done with this side, we'll flip it over and do the other side. So that's all there is to it. And remember, a clean blade makes a clean cut. And a habit I get into, and I would suggest to you, is to clean your blades after every use. That way, they're ready to go the next time. So there you have it, a saw blade roundup for your table saw, your stationary crosscut machines, and your circular saws. For more great tips like this, visit FamilyHandyman.com.